Well, fiber to the home is a method of transporting signals from the point of origin, which might be called a head end or a hub, out to a subscriber. And it is a solution that doesn't require any active devices, so it allows us to deliver this content at a much reduced operating expense and for greater distances and higher volume of content as well.
The biggest driver is certainly speed and the capacity of a fiber plant. HFC certainly has limited capacity, although that capacity has been expanding with new technologies recently. But the big thing about fiber to the home to me is that it's, I don't want to say future-proof, because nothing is really future-proof, but better future-prepared. We know that we're able to do 10 gig now on fiber to the home. We're seeing architectures of 40 and 100 gig come out. Upstream is looking like it's headed towards 10 gig as well. So I think from a capacity standpoint, it has really significant legs.
So the drivers for fiber to the home are primarily bandwidth and operating expenses. So if you look at the way fiber can be transported over very large distances, it does not require any amplification generally to get to the service area. And that means the reduction of a lot of active devices that require maintenance and that also consume a lot of power. So from an operating environment, it's much less costly to operate, and it delivers much, much higher bandwidth than you have with the traditional alternatives.
I think one of the biggest drivers for fiber to the home is probably network reliability. With HFC plant, there's a lot more potential points of failure. There's a lot of pin connectors out there, both on the transport and feeder cables. Whereas with the PON network, or fiber to the home network, a lot of that doesn't exist. It's almost a purely passive network, way fewer points of potential failure, less power supplies are needed, if any, and just network reliability.
So think of fiber to the home as this roaring river, huge river of bandwidth. And it's leaving the cable operator all the way through the access network, and then the river branches off into smaller rivers. So we take this huge optical signal, this big river, we hit a splitter, and we break off into little tiny rivers. Still rivers, not streams, because it has tons of bandwidth potential. And each one of those rivers will connect to little tiny huts, if you will, or houses. And those rivers will feed the water, in our case, bandwidth, to all these subscribers. Now think of the packets as boats that can go on this roaring river to the subscriber. There's different types of boats. So if you want to use Ethernet, you can get an Ethernet boat. And then you can use that to travel over the river, go down, be split off, and those Ethernet packets can arrive at different subscribers' locations. If you prefer, you want to use asynchronous transfer mode or ATM, that's an option. Maybe a GPON solution, a gigabit passive optical network. That's another way of doing fiber to the home. T1, E1, Sonnet. You can have different types of boats. So what we're saying here is you have more opportunity for different packets, and these different packets can carry the data. And then the same in the upstream. The subscriber can use their smaller river and travel back up the river, and all those boats will then connect to the large raging river that will feed back into the cable operator. Now the nice thing about this river is we can change the endpoints of the river. So for instance, all of a sudden 40 gigabit per second Ethernet comes down the road. We're able to actually change the technology in the head end and hub site, and also update the technology at the subscriber site, and we could turn that river into 4 times the raging river it is today. So say if it's a 10 gig today, we can make it a 40 gig tomorrow, and maybe even make it 100 gig the next day.
Well, it seems to be an accepted standard now that if you're going to do a greenfield build, which is to put out a service to new homes or areas that haven't been served before, fiber to the home is the de facto choice for that kind of solution because of the reduced operating expenses I mentioned and the high bandwidth that it has. DOCSIS 3.1, because it relies on existing infrastructure, seems to be the default for brownfield deployments. And that's probably a fairly conservative way to look at it. I think if our customers will take a look at total cost of ownership over, say, a 5 to 10 year period, weighing in the OpEx benefits of fiber to the home, and then being realistic about how bandwidth is consumed, and there will be a need to change out the endpoint electronics in that course of time, I think you'll find that fiber to the home might also be a worthwhile consideration for brownfield as well.
From a standpoint of the personnel at a cable company, the field technicians will be the most impacted. Splicing fiber is just a completely different animal from dealing with hardline coax or anything like that. Problems are going to be very different. You won't be chasing ingress the way you do now, but you might be looking for a speck of dust on a terminal somewhere. Honestly, a speck of dust in a coax connector right now is not a problem, you know? So I think the field technicians are, you know, a major factor, but it's going to have to go all the way from top to bottom in a cable company. The phone reps, various call centers, we'll have to be up to date on how to do diagnostics on the ONT, diagnostics on the network, looking at, you know, capacity on the network, things like that. So really everyone in the company is going to have to become familiar with it from one side or another.